Okay, today we're going to talk about counting Yidden, counting Kali. So we started last week. We talked about Rishal Shklaver, the Chasam Sofer a little bit, the dreamer, the dream and the dreamer. And this week I want to talk about the sugya a little bit more. I just figured we'll just to connect it to last week. I'll just read a little bit from Rishal Shklaver's letter written after the earthquake in 1836. It's an hakdama to the new version of Pasach Shulchan, which we mentioned last week. And in it he just writes a little bit. He's writing to Tzfas Leren, who's a banker in Amsterdam, who is very close to many Gedolei Yisrael. And he's writing to him to ask him for money. And he's just describing, I don't even need to read from it. He's describing the terrible tragedy that befell the Jews of Tzfas. And he says, Oy va'avoy, I'll just read it. It's very, very poignant. He says, Oy va'avoy, zen nisher b'lei isha, v'zois b'lei baal, he says it's like the whole community is mamish tzibrach and avshtika. There's nothing left. Husbands without wives, wives without husbands, parents without children. Everybody needs to fundraise. And then he goes into the pratim and he says people still have mortgages that need to be paid even though they're dead. Now, I don't know how the debt system in those days worked, but he said people borrowed money for houses. These chayvas still need to be paid, and now I'm on the hook for everybody's mortgage, and I have to come up with the money. It's a whole a very plaintive plea for money based on the circumstances that they're facing, and he's asking for money. Now, he, like we mentioned, was a good operator, and he had a good system in place for fundraising, a lot of good contacts, and he got to work right away. Now, one of the innovations that I think he's the innovator of this, that he innovated to fundraise, Rishal Shklaver, was he would send, today you see this a lot of times, support a family, 8 Yisaimim, numbers, it says the number, how many you're supporting for, give $100 for each family, give support. He was the one I think was machadish that idea, and he sent out to Europe, he wanted to send that up upon him, lists of be mishtatev with a family. This family, the Goldstein family, has 8 unmarried children, 2 married children, 4 einiklach, 3 sheep, and 2 cats, and this is what they need to the this is an innovation of his, I think, to send out fundraising paraphernalia. I would give a list. And the way he would do it is he would send you a list, basically let's say he would want to fundraise from Kovna. So he'd say, from Kovna we have over here in Yerushalayim 4 families that comprised of, 43 neshamas, of which this amount is and he'd send it back to Kovna. Kovna should support its families. And this was his innovation, how to fundraise. And it erased the shaila of counting Jews. Because in order to do this, you have to first count up everybody, get it all documented, write what you have on the paper, and then you could send out this paper with the amount of Jews, and it's counting. Now, Rishal Shklaver himself was nis'era to this shaila. Is it okay to count the Jews to send out this type of fundraising paraphernalia? He was nis'era to it from and the many aspects of it that are worth discussing, meaning what exactly is the issur to count Jews, when it applies, under what circumstances, what contexts, what vehicles do we use to count Jews, in every one of his contexts. And he sent the tshuva to the Chasam Sofer. He sent the shaila to the Chasam Sofer. And the Chasam Sofer wrote him back a tshuva, a shortish tshuva, where he's extremely machmer about counting Jews. Ad kedei kach that if you go with the Chasam Sofer shita kipshutei, a Rebbe probably can't even have an attendance book, with everyone in the class written down, the 29 kids in the class and whatever, maybe with 43 kids in the class, whatever the number is. He can't, a Rebbe can't even have an attendance book and do this properly. A Gabbai can't even have a shul list. If you go with the Chasam Sofer Kipshutei, he's extremely, extremely machmer. Rishal Shklaver has much more makam lahakal. I want to go through the sig a little bit, and I think we'll see that Rishal Shklaver has a lot to stand on to be mekel. And it's yitachin that the Chasam Sofer was being particularly machmer about the shaila, because it was after a tremendous, magefa, so to speak, that had struck in this kehila, and the Chasam Sofer was being very, very nizzer, as we'll see, in anything that has to do with Ayin Hara and magefa and etc. But let's go through the Indian. I don't even know how much of the Chasam Sofer himself is negay for us to actually touch upon, but we'll get to it. The other great part of the Pasach Shulchan, if anybody wants to look, if you're not learning Zram and you still want to look at Pasach Shulchan, in the Hakdama that he wrote, the Pasach Shulchan, he wrote, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 pages about the Goin and the Goin Svarim. It's like a ode to the Goin, like a mamish, on the highest level. I have a chalam, I always talk about this. There's a sefer that Mosadav Cook put out called Hadras Eliyahu. It's all the Hakdamas to the Goin Svarim. He used to Goin himself, never published anything, so they're all written by Talmidim who adored him, Pashad, who held him to be mamish Echad B'Kama Deir. It's not Echad B'Dara, So the Hakdamas that are written are marvelous. And someone in Mosad Cook noticed this and put together a sefer called Hadras Elio, which is just Hakdamas. I think it's a Musar sefer to read it. I had a Chalam once to go through it, with a Chabura, cover to cover. Today's not that day. In any case, it's just Maramakam Ma'alma. If you want to see one of them, this is in there obviously, and Hadras Elio B'chlal is a beautiful, beautiful sefer in this vein. Now, on to the sugya of counting Jews. Now, counting Jews is one of these mystifying sugyas because everybody knows we don't count Jews, right? Everybody knows it. Every kid knows we don't count Jews. And when you come into a shul, there's many, many mnemonics that are used to count Jews, but nobody just counts, 1, 2, we just don't do that. We know this, we just don't do that. Right? So today the popular one is Hashia Samecha, that one. Back in the day, and if we have time, we'll get to the different Rishonim that talk about this already. There was all sorts of different psukim that had deeper significance and meaning that were used as mnemonics to count, a tzibur of 10 people. Yirsheh, we all know. Now, what's fascinating is that it's not gebracht in the Rif, it's not gebracht in the Rosh, it's not gebracht in Shulchan Aruch. This din that we don't count Jews it's not a din Shulchan Aruch. It's not even Rav Rishonim, Rav the Piskei Rishonim, the Rishonim who extract all the psak from the Gemaras. In the Gemaras that discuss it, don't bring it as a halacha. B'dafka left out the Rambam because the Rambam does quote the halacha, not as like a halacha about Minyan Yisrael, like in a very when he discusses Payasis, he does quote this halacha, and we'll see it. In Hilchos Tmidin and Musafin, the Rambam brings this halacha, which is al asar, it's al mekayme for where the din comes from, but it's not like a halacha about not counting Jews, not Medina Ayin Hara, Medina whatever it is. So it's a halay davarhu that the Gedolei Poskim don't bring it. Befrat, besides for that, not only don't the Gedolei Poskim don't bring it, the Meinei HaMitzvahs don't bring it either. Meaning even the Rambam, who quotes in Hilchos himself in Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rambam doesn't bring it as a lav, not to count Jews. The Yereim, the Smag, the Smak, the Katz, all the different versions of the Sefer Meinei HaMitzvahs, the Chinuch, don't bring the Isser to count Jews as an Isser deraisa. So it's halay davar, it's a milsa de tmiyah, that it doesn't really make it halacha. Now, mitzad echad, it's a davar yudua, everybody knows it. Mitzad sheni, it really, really doesn't make it halacha. So let's figure out what this Isser is, what the parameters of the Isser is, and then hopefully we'll get to some of the shilas that the Sefer Misosh Glava were arguing about. If not, then it's also fine. It's maramakim, it's a machlekes that exists. In any case, the Gemara there's two Gemaras that talk about it. I want to read both of them because they're very different than each other. And there's makom to be mefalpul, like why the Gemara says it in two different ways. The Gemara in Brachas and the Samach Beis and Beis brings as follows. David HaMelech, when he was talking about the mavucha, the tzara that happened with Shaul, David HaMelech was appointed to be king. Shaul didn't know about it. Shaul was ready for him. When Shaul did find out about it, he was ready for him. Something that David HaMelech predicted would happen to him, and it happened. So David says, Hashem is Sisicha. David HaMelech refers to the fact that Shaul was ready for him as a hasasa from Hashem. Like Hashem was mesis Shaul to be ready for him. Kaidua, Shaul was a tzaddik. We know Shaul was a tzaddik Yisrael Elam, and Afal Pikin, he was ready with David in a crazy way. And David HaMelech himself refers to it as like the Eibusher was mesis Shaul to do this. Like Hashem was mesis him. Now Hakadosh Baruch Hu felt that was a disrespectful way to refer to the event. Hagam l'chayra, that is what it was. Meaning Shaul on his own was not supposed to be someone who would be nichshel on these averis. But Hashem was upset about that. And the Gemara tells us as follows. Hashem says, Amar Elazar, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu David. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told David Kaviyachol, Mesis Karasali, you called me a Mesis, you referred to me as a Mesis, like I'm being Mesis Klal Yisrael. Hareini Machshilcha B'davar Shafilu Tinoika Shal B'Yisrael Ben Yoidin Oisei. Now this sprach that I said, Kol Babi Rav Dechad Yevin knows this, it really comes from this Gemara. Hashem tells him, I'm going to make you fall for something that every child knows. Tinoika Shal B'Yisrael Ben Yoidin Oisei. It's a mefurish pasuk in the Torah in Parshas Kisisa. It says when you count Klal Yisrael, everyone should give machzas shekel pkudeim, and they won't die from the thing. Miyad vayam etzatan Yisrael v'ksiv Yasis says David bahem lemer lech menei Yisrael. The Satan was meses David to go say let's count Klal Yisrael. V'kiven the meninu l'shachim menai kayfet l'chsiv yitn Hashem dvar dever b'Yisrael me'abayk v'ad eis mayed. Fine, and David Melech did it wrong. He didn't take a shekel, chatzi shekel from each person, and Klal Yisrael had suffered a terrible magefa. As I said in the Gemara. Now, if you look at this Gemara, the Gemara sounds like it's a din pashut, right? It's a pasuk. It's a mitzvah issa deraisa. Torah says kisisa. Maybe it's a lav b'machlal say. Maybe it's not a lav gomer. Maybe it's a lav b'machlal say. But it's a din gomer in the Torah. The Torah says not to count Jews, and other, but the Gemara refers to it as something that feel to negesh b'yisrael and say. What do you say? 1 second. Yeah, that case is everyone. Yeah, okay. You're already saying Torah. 1 second. This is the Gemara. The Gemara says the din that afil tenekesh b'shav yodim is not counting everyone. You come to minyan, It could be 11. It's usually when there's 11 nefashis in the room. It's not everyone. Klal Yisrael's minig is zikr not like that. Is zikr not to count even, not much a small item. So the Gemara says this. As they say in the Gemara Brachas. Now the Gemara in Yuma is different. The Gemara in Yuma, the Mishnah over there, the famous Mishnah that Reb Chaim Ozer was referencing about the payasis. The Mishnah says in the beginning of the second parak, it says B'Rishayna Kol Misharetz Litrim. They would run up eventually when things happened. So they made payasis, and everybody would stick out a finger, right? And the Gemara tells us that they didn't stick out certain fingers, only certain fingers. That's the Mishnah. It says the Gemara as follows. It's a Gemara Chav Beis Beis Yuma. It says like this: Tana Haitziu Etzba'isayim Leminyan V'Nimninu. They would say, stick out your fingers and let's count the two. Misayel Rav Yitzchak. It's a riot Rav Yitzchak. The Amar Rav Yitzchak. Also Limnus says Yisrael Afilu Dvar Mitzvah. Also to count Klal Yisrael, to count Yidden, even for a Dvar Mitzvah. The Chsiva Yifkedim Bebazak. Maskiv L'Ravashi. How do you know it's using something to count them with, like some sort of item to collect? Maybe it's a location. It's not using anyone who's meinik Klal Yisrael is over belav. So the Gemara over here brings two different psukim, two lavim, kanira, not to count Jews. Now the problem is that for those who know Navi, the over belav, not you saying, the over belav that the Gemara brings over here, one's a pasuk in Hosea and one's a pasuk in Shmuel. B'derech klal, when we refer to over belav, we don't mean psukim in Hosea and Shmuel, we mean psukim in the Torah. Over here, the Gemara in Yuma, Hagamit refers to it as over belav. It brings these favar from the psukim in Hosea and Shmuel. Nishna Adem, it's even more shver, is the Gemara in Brachas brought a pasuk. It says Kisi says Shreis B'nei Yisrael. So lav b'machlal say. The Asay says do it with shkalim. From there is mashma, not do it without shkalim. So, meaning the Gemara in Yuma, it brings kilu shvacham mekayris because it brings psukim in Hosea and Shmuel. B, it's calling it a lav. C, it's missing mefurish psukim. D, that is already musker in a Gemara in this context. It's mamish like it's a milsa de tmiyah. The way the whole Gemara is broken down over here, mamish doesn't bring it. Now, it's also not really a minion. They were just where? Pious is not even a minion. Okay, so 1 second. Yeah, that's already maybe a teretz. That's a teretz. No, that may be a teretz. That kasha might be a teretz, right? That kasha might be a teretz. The vice says that's a different type. That's already a teretz. That's not a kasha. But I know who told me recently. When someone has 5 kashas, 2 are kashas, 3 are terutzim. Right? This is how it is. And so I got to D, so we're already up to we're in teretz territory. But so this is the Gemara. The Gemara in Yuma Kilo is very different than the Gemara in Brachas. It's very strange. I mean, these Gemaras don't seem to shim with each other. So Vaisais, there's more going on over here. This is not an Isser Pashat. Like the Gemara refers to it as Lashain, it's over Belav. Vaisais, this is not a straightforward Isser Pashat in the regular way. So let's go a little bit Keseder Advarim. First, I want to handle, there's a few different terutzim as to why this is not included in the Minyan HaMitzvahs, and then we'll handle maybe the framework of these two Gemaras. So the basic kasha is that the Minyan HaMitzvahs and the Shulchan Aruch don't bring this down as an Isalav. So there's 3 mahalchim in the Gedolei Achronim to handle this. The Be'er Sheva in his Pirush Masechtas Tamid, he's the one who starts the kasha, starts the party. He asks it, but all the Achronim give terutzim to it. So there's one teretz that some Achronim say, and this is it's more than one place. Say that it's not an isalav. The ein bezeh lav gomer ki midas chasidus ulekach leinishnas b'sifrei mitzvahs. As I state, this is the tshuva that I'm quoting from the Pnei Maven, but it's other places. The other Achronim say it also. Taka, it's not an isalav gomer. Hagam, the Gemara refers to it as an isalav. It's not an isalav gomer. Haraya that the Gemara in Yuma struggles to bring psukim from Hosea, from Shmuel. And even though the Gemara refers to it in the language of a lav, it's not a lav, it's a zahirus. Why? Because hayos, when you don't do it the right way, terrible outcomes could happen, right? Magefa could come, or whatever it is. So maybe it's a zahirus, it's not a lav gomer. Now the problem is that the Gemara in Yuma Lahedi says over belav. That's a very, very specific way of talking about it. It's like over belav, which is a strange mahalach. And the Rambam in Hilchos Tmidim Musaf Parak Dalet, and I want to read that for you. The Rambam in Hilchos Tmidim Musaf says like this. The Rambam in Parak Dalet says, why is the way to do it with fingers that are being stuck out instead of doing it al anashim atzmon? The Rambam, who's a halacha sefer, the Rambam is not the Gemara. It's asr to count Jews. That sounds like an isser gomer behachlet. I'm saying asr limnes Yisrael. Now, okay, we have to know maybe which case there I'm talking about, but in Rambam Shed seems to be an isser gomer. The Chavz Yair in a tshuva, a langa tshuva in Simentes about other inyanim, he writes that it's not an Isser Torah, it's Midivrei Kabbalah. Okay, so he's calling it an Isser. It's shaykh to call it an Isser, but it's not an Isser Deiraisa, it's an Isser Kabbalah. That's why the Minei Mitzvahs don't bring it down. That seems to be the most popular teretz in the Achronim, the Chida and Ein Zeicher, Yerucham Fishel Perla in his Pirush on yeah. Yerucham Fishel Perla says that. Hagam, the Gemara's, I heard that bringing Psukim Deiraisa, right? The Gemara in Brachos referred to bring a Pasuk Deiraisa. So, why? No, but the Gemara in Brachos brings a Pasuk from the Torah. Kisi says Reish B'nai Yisrael. That's why I was going. I said the Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara in Yuma is a good raya. The Gemara in Yuma sounds like it's bringing Divrei Kabbalah. It's only Psukim Navim. But the Gemara in Yuma is bringing Psukim from Deiraisa. Now you could say that's a lav b'mechlal say. That's not right. Not a lav gomer maybe for the Minei Mitzvahs. Meaning you have to say Shtikul Torah. Why the Minei Mitzvahs leave it out? But as I state in those Achronim, and other Achronim say. Stam Kipshutei, like I've been saying all along, is that it's a lav b'mechlal say, so it's not included in the Minyan Mitzvahs, but it is a echta lav. It's a regular lav. It's a real din. It's just not included in the Minyan Mitzvahs. Now, because these are the mahalchim that the Achronim say, to resolve the question of why it's not included in the Minyan Mitzvahs count. Now, the truth is that doesn't answer all of our kilu kashas of stimming the Gemara in Yuma with the Gemara in Brachos. Like meaning, why is the Gemara over there use certain psukim, over here use other psukim, different sprachs, different makairis. And this, the Marsha in Chidushei Agadas and Yuma and Daf Beis asks this. And the Marsha says, I don't understand how these two Gemaras stem with each other. He says, "V'hadlei ma'isi le'isur minyan d'Moshe b'chatzi shkalim." On the Gemara in Yuma, yes, the Gemara in Yuma brings the pasuk from Moshe, brings the pasuk from Shmuel. Why don't you bring the pasuk with the Gemara in Brachos? Why don't you bring the pasuk from Moshe Rabbeinu? Zak the Marsha. He says, "V'hadlei ma'isi le'isur minyan d'Moshe b'chatzi shkalim." V'leimano yisrael lahedi kamforish v'leiyeh b'em negev. The mashmash minyan sheld by ayin hara l'havi negev. It sounds like again a Gemara in Brachos, again a pasuk that there's an ayin hara that sheld. Yeshleimer the ikkel lefrushe the lakach mem chatzi shkalim lekapara shchata be'egel. It would be shaykh to be mefarish that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu had to take chatzi shkalim by that minyan was l'chaper ala egel, l'chaper ala nafsheisam, ulahagin b'kach aleim shleiyeh b'em negev. Av minyan bazak l'shaykh lekapara ala mishum iser minyan. The minyan bazak, which was done by Shaul, in the pasuk in Shmuel, that was done at a time not of Mageifa. That only could be because the issue of counting Jews. V'chein minyan betlaim lakal meim mishum kapara bo lekarbon. The kulum with the Shaul havi kedulakaman ve'ein adam mischaper b'dav shein shaloi v'oid lehuzkaben lekapara v'daik. So the Marsha is being mefarish saying yana pasuk kisisa is not a raya. That could be talking about to avoid einshim, to avoid Mageifa during a time of Mageifa. The Gemara in Yuma, that's the real makar. Now the Achronim asked the Ein Yaakov in his Pirush, the Shos Yaakov in his Pirush in Ein Yaakov, he asks, he says it's a milsa d'tmiyad l'chayr nesalim men masha amr b'brachas gabidav nechshav davar yidu l'chol Yisrael. Says the Gemara calls it a davar yidu l'chol Yisrael. The Gemara is clearly learning from that pasuk that it's a din pashut, like a din yidua. Everybody knows this. How can you tell me that is a way to be madchi in a pasuk? That's all fine and well till you get to the Gemara. Chazal already took this pasuk and learned it this way. They call it a din yidua. I mean, what's the as I fact Ein Yaakov on the Marsha? And okay, you can answer that. Once we know from this pasuk, and Achronim says, once we know from the pasuk in Hosea and Shmuel that it's an independent halacha that has nothing to do with Mageifa, then we backdate it and we see that it's really a pasuk in Parshas Kisisa, and that's where the Gemara in Brachos comes from. But it has to go in this order. Meaning, you have to have the Gemara in Yuma that brings its Makaris, and only then could you go back to have the Gemara in Yuma's Makaris. That's so some Achronim say that. But that's the Marshal's Mahalach. The Chida in that same shtickle in Ein Zeicher where he handles the Minei Mitzvahs. So the Chida says Mishum she'ein lanu misham el lesser saminyan ha'am kulei, which you were saying. The Chida says Yana Kisisa is only talking about counting Gans Klal Yisrael, but to count anything less than Gans Klal Yisrael, just pieces, that we need the Gemara in Yuma for, because the Gemara in Yuma is talking about, like you pointed out, mamash literally a small circle economy. It could be 40 kahanim. It's not mamash. Big portions of the whole Klal Yisrael, not the entire Klal Yisrael. It's for battle. But the pasuk in Shmuel is not talking about the whole Klal Yisrael. The Vivkei and Bazik is for the army, so it's as is the Chida that it's not full Klal Yisrael. So even if it's not full Klal Yisrael, there's more makom to be. You would think that it's allowed. Kamashman from the Gemara in Yuma that it learns from these psukim that it's an isser, and even for a little bit of Klal Yisrael, not to count it. Now, so this is some of the Achronish raid on how to stem these two Gemaras. But Lamaisa, if you really go back to the source, to the Ikrei Advarim over here. There's a yesodistic thing that's happening in these two Gemaras, that there are really two different sugyas that are happening over here. Now, I want to start with a shtickle chakira. It sounds like a silly chakira a little bit, but you'll see that it's not silly. The Rishonim are handling it already. As follows. This we say there's an issur to count Jews. The issur is to count the number, to have it documented, to put together a census that says the number of Jews. Or the issur is to count Jews. You're not allowed to do the Maisa Minyan. Like you're not allowed to count Jews. Or you're not allowed to have a count of Jews. Having a count of Jews is, very, very subject to Ein Hara, and that's very dangerous. The nafkamina would be, let's say you're not counting only Jews. Let's say you're not counting all the Jews. Right? Meaning these nafkaminas that we're talking about already are nafkaminas.
When Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to count, we had a million of Yidden.
Yeah. There we had a million of Yidden. Bethlon, we had a million. We came up with a number. Yeah, but one second. I want to go into the you'll see this now, and I'm not going to bury the lead. I'll tell you right now where I'm going. Maybe that's a problem. I mean, even if a guy is doing the census and a guy is counting, maybe just knowing the number is the problem. Maybe, right? We don't know. We don't talk about numbers. You know, like alta babis. Like how many eniklach do you have? Can I know who the chabayniklach? You don't say how many. Like such a type of thing. Like you don't like so. And there's nafkaminas in this obviously. And I think that the Malbim and the Ralbag and the other achronim, each one. See, achronim back then didn't talk in this parlance, b'chlal, so it's hard to know if this is exactly what they're saying. But today we would call this that l'chayri this Gemara is saying the Gemara knew and the Gemara brachas long is that there's two dinim in this minion of Jews. There's an isser to count Jews and there's an isser to have a count of Jews. The Gemara in brachas, which brings us the psukim from Kisisa, which is about counting all the Jews, is an isser to have Jews counted. You're not allowed to have the count of Jews. That's Mishamai and Hara. And then the Gemara in Yuma, which is talking about a small group, Payasis, and it's bringing psukim makaris that knock on Klal Yisrael, like the Chidas Chilik, is telling you that there's an isser to count Jews. Nothing to do with having the count. Now, I want to just buy that ice a little bit from the Rishonim, like this. So, what's the Tamad Varim? Let's go back to the core azach. What's the Tamad Varim that we're not allowed to count Jews? So, Rashi in Chumash says very straightforward. Rashi says, I want to just read it properly. 1 second. I don't know where it is now. Rashi in Chumash says that having a number of all the Jews, I wish I had the exact bracha in front of me. Rashi says having the number of all the Jews is Gerim Tayin Hara, and Mamela, we're not allowed to count all the Jews. You're not allowed to count Jews because we don't want to have Ayin Hara. So Rashi sounds like he's learning pretty straightforward that the Isser is to know the number, like to come to a full number of Jews is an Isser because it's an Ayin Hara. Rashi says, Rashi says, Shaminyan Sholut by Ayin Hara, Hadavar Ba'aleim, K'may Shemitzini B'mei David. Shaminyan Sholut by Ayin Hara, the number makes Sholut Ayin Hara, and like we find by David, that Ayin Hara came. Now, the Ralbag in the beginning of Parashat Kisisa and Rabbeinu Bachai and the Marit and Safan Paneach say different sprachs, and without getting too granular over here, I just want to say some of the sprachs, and I think that there's a few things that are happening over here. The Ralbag L'mashal says like this. He says it's the Isser to count Jews, the Ayin Hara of counting Jews is Inyan Tivi. He says, Hina Metzinu Sha'amisper Sibas HaNegef. V'yidama Sheheza Inyan Shaval Ayin Hara. Asiba behezek hanimtza b'lefim ha'achshev ki kvar yutku v'yatzu me'ayin tzas adim. Okay, the Rabbah talks in his sprach, but he says that knowing the number is some sort of physical ayin hara that happens, and he describes it in his way. And he's seemingly in the Akedah, the Bal Akedah, and it's not set up to say that Parshi is today it is whatever, but the Akedah also says such a thing like this that it seems like al derech Rashi that knowing the number is the issue. Now Rabbeinu Bachai in Parshi Kisisa says something different. He says like this. I want to read you what he says. He says V'gilu l'cha akasov. Because it was with the shkalim.
You have to still know the number.
No, but with the shkalim was a kapara. The shkalim was a kapara. The shkalim was to be mechaper for that. Yeah, the chaper. I think Rashi says the chaper. The pasuk. I think the pasuk says the chaper. Yeah, the chaper says the chaper. It's a chaper. Yeah, so that's a kapara. Yeah, that was a system. But he says his rayas from David HaMelech. When David HaMelech neglected to do that system, and he got a whole number, then it was a problem. So Rabbi Bachai says like this. Rabbi Bachai says v'gilu l'cha akasov ki ha'am hanifrat b'minyanoi kol echad l'gulgulaisam. Hinehu mushgach mibala ashkacha yisalev v'chol ma'asav nefratim lefanav v'oz yachal negaf. Masha'enkem betchila shayu inyani nimshach b'chlal harabim. Avalata behes kol yachid v'yachid v'chol ma'asav nefratim yafshim built the yoinish. The Rebbeinu Bachai says when you individualize each person and you say here's Pliny, here's Almaini, here's whatever. It was okay. 1 second. You put them on the table. Now Hakadosh Baruch Hu takes a look at them and says 1 second. You don't. So Kilu, we look at a negef as an inyan tziburi. Right, like a negef is something that affects the whole tzibur. Like it just comes out and kills large amounts. Rabbeinu Bachai is saying it. A negef is an Indian prati. So many people, when Hashem wants to punish so many pratim at the same time, He unleashes a negef because that's the best way to. That's a practical. Like kilo, a negef is not a tzarchet tzibur. The way the Rabbeinu Bachai is saying, a negef is prati. Each person who deserves it, and when you count each person, you expose him to this danger of suddenly you're an individual. Business from Klal Yisrael. You're not like a tuffle to the zach. You're an individual. Individuals have din. Individual, let me start tanning and you can have negef. That's how the Rebbeinu Bachai says it. It says, and we know Yom Niram, everyone talks about this. The best way to herd immunity, right? We know this in every context. Herd immunity is the best way to stay with the herd and you're probably safe. When you individualize yourself and you stand out, okay, but you're on the table now. Now let's handle you. And this is stamazai. This is practical too. In Hilchas bin Abn L'Chavere, when a person is an individual, too much of an individual, people start having bikairis, opinions, shittas, critiques. If you're just a guy in shul, you sit, no one bothers you. No one bothers the guy in the third table, the 8th seat. That's not who, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what Rabbeinu Chaya is saying. Like if you're an individual, it opens you up to problems. Now the Marit, who's already the Chazon Ish, every time I say this over, I get flack. But the Chazon Ish said that the Marit was the Gedol HaAchreinim. I would not be qualified to say this, but the Marit said that the Chazon Ish said that the Marit is Gedol HaAchreinim. It's brought out many places from him. I don't know why. I don't even know what the credentialing. I'm so mufkim. I don't know what the credentialing procedure is. Meaning, what makes someone the as I the Chazon Ish gesagt. So Marit in Tzfas Paneach, he says as follows. I think Tzfas Paneach is on mitzvahs, like Klal mitzvahs. The Marit says like this: "Is near be'enai shetame iser shenesar shleilimnes es Yisrael u'mashek damnu she Yisrael tzarich sheyevam achdus gomer." Klal Yisrael needs to be Klal Yisrael in order to be protected. V'haminyan meir al apirud v'achiluk. V'alzeh amar v'hayir mitzvah b'nei Yisrael k'chol yam shel yimud v'lo yisafer. Klal Yisrael, B'nai Yisrael is supposed to be Layimud V'lo Yisafer. It's supposed to be this grace, amorphous, large unit. Now, today we like to shalzach on the 12 Shvatim, and everyone has a derech, and that's true, but Mitzacheni, Klal Yisrael is supposed to be Klal Yisrael. The schusim that Klal Yisrael has, a lot of it is it comes from being one large group that's comprised of all these little things. So the Marit and the Rabbeinu B'chai seem to be saying a whole different vart. They're saying the vart of counting is you individualize people. Now, L'chaira, these two taimim that are being gebracht in the Rishonim and the Achronim over here, to me, is the answer to the Chakir that we opened with. If you say like the Rabbeinu B'chai and the Tzafnas Paneach and the Marit, that the Vardas you don't want to individualize, so you don't have to count Gans Klal Yisrael. There's not, even if I sit here in a room and I want to count up, place 10 people and I want to say I want to make a raffle. And I say, okay, let me count the people on the raffle, picking up, okay, there's 20 people, and make a number from 1 to 20, everyone start picking, right? Das Alain, I individualized. I counted each person. I individualized. I did something. That itself opens up to the negative, to the the negativity of counting. But according to the Tam that Rashi's saying, or that other Rishonim, the Ralbag is saying, other Rishonim are saying, you have to count the whole thing. You put the whole thing. That's an ayin hara. It's Hashem Azach. There's so many. It's so numerous. It's so substantial. Which is how the Rishonim, the scribe David Melch, the David Melch did it because he wanted to count. He had no reason. It was like stam to misgah and the fact that it's a large tzibur. Then that's a different time. Now the Gemara in Yom and the Gemara Brachas are mamish along these lines. The Gemara in Brachas is talking about Parshas Kisisa, counting all of Klal Yisrael, and it says David Melech, I'm going to be machshilcha, David shafilu to negesh b'yisrael ben yodim. The basic idea of counting all of Klal Yisrael, which leads to an ayin hara, kipshuta and a magefa, that was what David. And the Gemara in Yuma, when it's talking about payasis, which is a small group, it could be a handful of people. There, the Gemara has to bring other psukim, because to bring the psukim of Gans Klal Yisrael wouldn't be relevant. It's a different isser. Over here, the Gemara in Yuma is discussing the isser of counting Jews, not of having a count of Jews. Now, if both of these things are true, that this is the isser, now putting aside that rather not this or this really makes it the Shulchan Aruch, as previously noted. So for now, it's just a lamdisha oiskebaita chilik from Rishonim that we seem to say in the Gemara. Now, I just want to show you that the Magen Avram, who does bring in Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avram is in Kufn Vav and Archaim. He brings like the catch-all zone of it's really mostly Benad Machaveri de Kazachen, but where is it? He says, one second. Oh, here it says. I think the Chasam Sofer held like that. I think the Chasam Sofer, when he's being super machmer about this, is Chamir Sekant Misur. There's many riots that the Chasam Sofer took that posture in a lot of, even Isiv Heter. No, we're not going to talk about it. Okay, but to state this out, the Magen Avram in Kufn Vav said like this: Asa limnos Yisrael, afila enim mechaven limnos, rak lahatel gairol. You're not allowed to count Jews, even if you don't mean to count. Meaning, the Magen Avram is saying, you want to know prerequisite? Of course, there's a sugya in Brachas that talks about counting Jews. Getting to a number, very problematic. Ayin hara. There's another sugya. Don't count Jews even if you don't mean to have a number. Afilu dvar mitzvah, el meitziyin let's beisayim, umeinin let's beisayim. Yuma daf chav beis and beis. The makar for this din is the Gemara in Yuma. Gemara in Brachas, agaret. Don't count a full count. Gemara in Yuma is another din. Now, based on all of these different zachen and all the kashas and dukim, there's many tzadim l'hakal throughout the paiskim about counting. If you're counting using different vehicles, you're not counting everybody, or somebody else is doing the count, or a guy is doing the count, or you're just writing it just l'shem gur. Meaning, there's so many more facets to the sugya, and a lot of them is what the Machlekes, the Chasam Sofer, and Rishon Shklaver hinge upon. I'm sad to say we weiter didn't get to the Machlekes, the Chasam Sofer, and Rishon Shklaver this week. I don't know if we'll continue though, or I'll just leave it as a marmakim. We'll see, to be decided.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.